June 6, 1944, 00:15 hours. Strong Point WN62, Omaha Beach. Gefreiter Heinrich Severloh carefully cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun in the concrete bunker overlooking the channel. In his pocket he carried a letter from his girlfriend in Metzingen, promising to wait for him until the war's victorious end. "The invasion will be their grave. We will throw them back into the sea within hours." He had written these words to her just 3 days earlier, after Feldmarschall Rommel himself had inspected their positions. The Desert Fox had looked through Severloh's gun aperture, studied the overlapping fields of fire, and nodded with satisfaction. "When they come," Rommel had said, "this beach will be their cemetery." Through the embrasure, Severloh could see nothing but peaceful darkness over the channel. The night was calm, almost serene. In 12 hours, this same young man would be found weeping uncontrollably in his bunker, surrounded by 13,500 empty shell casings, his gun barrel warped from heat, watching an invasion force so vast that his mind would simply refuse to process what his eyes were seeing. Though Severloh would later claim to have inflicted 1,000 to 2,000 casualties, historians consider this impossible given that total American casualties at Omaha Beach from all causes were approximately 2,400. The mathematics of German defeat were about to be written not in strategic assessments or intelligence reports, but in the shocked testimonies of soldiers who would witness the largest amphibious invasion in human history from the wrong side of the gun sight. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 miles from Norway to the Spanish border, what German propaganda called the most formidable defensive line in military history. Along the Normandy coast, 58 divisions of varying quality manned positions that had consumed 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had declared it impregnable. The defensive preparations at Omaha Beach alone seemed to justify such confidence. The U.S. Army Center of Military History records that the Germans had constructed 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery positions, 18 anti-tank gun positions, 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach itself had been turned into a killing field. 3,700 obstacles had been planted in the tidal zone, including Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes, many topped with teller mines. Behind the beaches, 6.5 million mines had been laid, though Rommel had wanted 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had calculated the defensive firepower in his sector. His 4 batteries could theoretically deliver 120 rounds per minute into the beach sectors. Combined with other batteries, the Germans could concentrate massive firepower on any landing attempt. These calculations, however, assumed unlimited ammunition, an assumption that would prove fatally flawed. June 5th had brought weather that Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stuber in Paris had declared impossible for invasion. Wind speeds reached 20 to 25 knots, waves climbed to 6 feet, and low clouds hung at 500 feet. Stuber, using data from U-boats and weather stations, had assured the High Command that conditions would remain poor for at least 2 weeks. Based on this forecast, many senior officers had left their posts. Rommel himself had departed for Germany on June 5th to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying a pair of grey suede shoes he had purchased in Paris. General Friedrich Dollmann, commanding the 7th Army, had ordered division commanders to attend war games at Rennes. Even the naval patrols that normally swept the Channel had been cancelled due to rough seas. This meteorological confidence would prove to be the first German miscalculation. Unknown to Stuber, the Allies possessed weather stations in Greenland and weather flights over the Atlantic that detected a brief break in the storm, a 36-hour window that Group Captain James Stagg had identified and Eisenhower had seized. At 23:15 hours on June 5th, radar stations along the Norman coast began detecting unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets picked up massive aerial formations approaching from the north. The operators, however, had seen this before. Allied deception raids designed to keep German forces on alert. By 0030 hours on June 6th, reports began flooding in that challenged all assumptions. Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, were landing across Normandy. But the reports made no sense. Some units reported paratroopers to the east, others to the west. Some claimed they were British, others American. Dummy paratroopers with firecrackers attached, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, added to the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzergrenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was one of the first to grasp the situation's gravity. Awakened by reports of paratroopers landing near his positions, he immediately requested permission to attack. The response from division headquarters: "Do not move until the situation clarifies." Von Luck would later write in his memoir, Panzer Commander, "I knew at that moment we were lost. The paratroopers were clearly marking flanks for a landing. Every minute we waited gave them time to consolidate, yet we sat paralysed by our own command structure." June 6th, 0530 hours. As the first grey light began to illuminate the channel, German observers in forward positions began reporting something that their training had never prepared them for. Werner Pluskat, whose presence at the coast remains disputed by some historians, including Heinrich Severloh himself, was credited in some accounts with being among the first to report the armada. What is certain is that German observers across the Normandy coast witnessed from horizon to horizon a sea covered with vessels. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. Ships of every size and description, from massive battleships to tiny landing craft, spreading across the channel like a grey carpet. The invasion fleet consisted of 6,939 vessels, according to official Allied records, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 ancillary vessels, and 864 merchant ships. It was the largest naval armada ever assembled in human history. To the German defenders, raised on propaganda about Allied weakness and division, the sight was psychologically devastating. Bernhard Fröking, an artillery officer at WN 62 who would be killed later that day, reportedly told his men that they were witnessing the whole world arriving on their doorstep. At 0535 hours, the naval bombardment commenced. Nothing in the German defenders' experience, not the Eastern Front, not the heaviest RAF raids, had prepared them for what followed. The battleship USS Texas alone fired 255 14-inch shells at Point du Hoc in 34 minutes, according to Naval History and Heritage Command records. HMS Warspite, the first ship to open fire on D-Day at approximately 0500 hours, would deliver over 300 15-inch shells in the first 2 days, including 96 rounds fired at German positions on June 9th. The cumulative bombardment from the naval force exceeded anything the Wehrmacht had previously encountered. According to German veterans' accounts collected by the German Federal Archives, concrete bunkers designed to withstand any bombardment cracked under the naval gunfire. Men were buried alive, dug out and buried again as shells continued to rain down. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. These fortifications in which they had placed absolute confidence were crumbling like sandcastles. As the naval bombardment continued, the Luftwaffe's response revealed the true desperation of the German position. Oberst Josef Pips Priller, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His response, recorded in the Wing's war diary: "What entire force? I have 2 planes." The Luftwaffe, which had promised air superiority over any invasion, could muster only 319 sorties on D-Day, against 14,674 Allied sorties, according to U.S. Navy Office of Naval Intelligence records. Priller and his wingman, Unteroffizier Heinz Wodarczyk, made the only Luftwaffe attack on the beaches during the morning of June 6th, strafing Sword Beach once in their FW-190A-8 fighters before fleeing from overwhelming Allied fighter cover. This single strafing run by two planes against an invasion force of thousands became a symbol of German impotence. The promised knights of the air, who would darken the skies over any invasion, had been reduced to a futile gesture. At 0630 hours, the first assault waves hit the beaches. German defenders, despite the bombardment, manned their positions and opened fire. What followed was carnage that shocked even hardened veterans. Heinrich Sevelow, the machine gunner at WN-62, began firing at 0635 hours. His position, one of the few undamaged by the bombardment, commanded perfect fields of fire across Omaha Beach. In his 2005 memoir, WN-62 Erinnerungen an Omaha Beach, he stated he fired 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. While Sevelow claimed massive casualties, military historians note that his position, though deadly, was one of many factors in the Omaha Beach casualties, and specific numbers cannot be verified. What is certain is that his MG-42, firing at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute in short bursts, contributed significantly to what became known as Bloody Omaha. The German defenders began experiencing what military historians would later term material shock, the mental breakdown caused by confronting overwhelming force. No matter how many Americans, British, or Canadians fell, more appeared. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 more. Every silenced machine gun position was suppressed by naval gunfire that seemed unlimited. By midday, German positions began reporting critical ammunition shortages. The defensive plans had calculated ammunition expenditure based on repelling a limited assault. Nobody had planned for this scale of attack. According to Wehrmacht supply records, positions that had ammunition calculated for a 3-day battle exhausted their supplies within hours. Artillery batteries, the backbone of the defence, faced similar crises. The carefully husbanded ammunition supplies vanished under the intensity of combat. Attempts to bring forward reserve stocks failed. Every road was under constant Allied fighter-bomber attack. The contrast with Allied firepower was stark. German observers noted that American destroyers would fire hundreds of shells at single targets, while German artillery was rationed to 4 shells per gun per day by the afternoon of D-Day. The German Armour Reserve, the force that Rommel had insisted must defeat any invasion on the beaches, remained paralysed through the critical morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armoured unit close to the beaches, did not receive orders to attack until 1000 hours, 4 hours after the landings began. When the 21st Panzer finally attacked at 1620 hours, they advanced between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. According to divisional records, they reached the shore between Lyon-sur-Mer and Luc-sur-Mer around 1900 hours, the only German armoured unit to reach the coast on D-Day. However, at 2100 hours, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Mallard, 250 gliders bringing reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this massive air armada as a threat to their flanks, they withdrew. The division lost 54 tanks and armoured vehicles on D-Day, approximately 25% of their strength in a single day. The counterattack also encountered specialised Allied armour they had never seen before. Hobart's Funnies, modified tanks with flails for mine clearing, flamethrowers, and bridging equipment, seemed to belong to a different era of warfare entirely. Throughout D-Day, German units faced a threat they had never encountered at this scale: massive airborne forces operating behind their lines. The 6th Airborne Division, British, and the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, American, created chaos that multiplied their actual strength. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander, serving with the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, was in Normandy during the invasion. His professional assessment, recorded in post-war interviews, was damning. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been: massive, coordinated and supplied. We dropped battalions, they dropped divisions. We were supplied by single aircraft. They had endless streams of gliders and transport planes. The psychological impact of paratroopers appearing everywhere paralysed German responses. Units refused to move, fearing ambush. Others fired at shadows, sometimes at their own men. The confusion multiplied German problems exponentially. As D-Day progressed, German command and control disintegrated. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. French resistance, activated by coded BBC messages, cut telephone cables and destroyed relay stations. Radio communications were jammed by Allied electronic warfare units. General-Lieutenant Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, attempted to coordinate the defence from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary records increasing frustration as contact with forward units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the communication network. Individual unit commanders made decisions in isolation, without knowledge of the larger picture. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders took stock of their situation. The impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple places. The Luftwaffe had essentially ceased to exist over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine had managed to sink one destroyer, USS Corrie, while losing 15 E-boats and numerous smaller craft. General-Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter, commanding the 716th Division, which had borne the brunt of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength, 35%. All coastal strongpoints lost. Artillery, 90% destroyed. Enemy advancing inland. The statistics told a story of complete tactical failure despite individual acts of heroism. In a single day, the German forces had suffered casualties equivalent to those of a major battle, while the Allies continued landing fresh troops as if D-Day was merely the beginning, not the climax. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German units attempted to regroup and counter-attack. These efforts revealed the full extent of Allied superiority. Every German movement was detected by radar, illuminated by flares, and destroyed by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's panzer grenadiers, finally released to counterattack, advanced toward Sword Beach in darkness. According to his memoir, they were immediately illuminated by parachute flares and subjected to devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It was like daylight. Every vehicle, every soldier was visible. The shells came from the sea with perfect accuracy. We lost half our strength without seeing a single enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements continued landing. The artificial Mulberry harbours were already being assembled, supply ships anchored in organised rows. The invasion wasn't just succeeding, it was transforming into a permanent presence. As German reinforcements attempted to reach Normandy, they encountered complete interdiction of movement. Every road, railway and bridge was under constant attack. According to Wehrmacht transportation records, units that should have reached the front in one day took up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken 3 days. They arrived having lost 30% of their vehicles to air attack without firing a shot at ground forces. The psychological impact was devastating. If they couldn't even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to influence it? Meanwhile, Allied logistics operated with stunning efficiency. LSTS, landing ship, tank, discharged entire armoured regiments in hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies daily, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were approaching psychological collapse. They had lost 26,000 men killed, wounded or missing, roughly equivalent to 2 full divisions. Replacements were minimal. Meanwhile, Allied strength grew hourly. Carentan fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, Elite troops who had never previously retreated withdrew in disorder. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heydte, reported to higher headquarters, "My regiment no longer exists as a combat unit. The survivors are psychologically broken." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. According to British military records, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers in the Battle of Villers-Bocage within 15 minutes. German propaganda seized on this victory as proof that German arms could still prevail. But even this victory revealed the futility of the German position. Wittmann's Tiger tank, disabled in the battle, was replaced by the Germans with difficulty. The British losses were replaced within hours. The tactical brilliance of individual German soldiers could not overcome industrial mathematics. Wittmann himself, with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger was destroyed, whether by British gunner Joe Eakins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry or Canadian forces remains disputed. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace was eliminated by an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for 1 Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th provided another psychological blow. This major port, fortified over 4 years and garrisoned by 21,000 men, was supposed to hold for months. It fell in 5 days of serious fighting. General-Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, commanding the garrison, had proclaimed he would defend Cherbourg to the last bullet. Instead, he surrendered on June 26th. In his post-war interrogation, he explained that resistance became meaningless against unlimited enemy resources, a theme that would echo throughout German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, beginning July 25th, delivered the knockout punch to German forces in Normandy. According to official US Army Air Force records, the preparatory bombardment involved 1,503 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping over 4,100 tons of bombs in a concentrated area just 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep. General-Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division, reported to Army Group B, "My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers, but broken men." The bombing was so intense that it killed Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theatre, who was observing from what was thought to be a safe distance. If American generals weren't safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, August 12th to 21st, became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. According to Allied intelligence reports confirmed by post-war German records, approximately 10,000 Germans died in the pocket and 50,000 were captured. Over 300 tanks and armoured vehicles were destroyed, along with 2,500 other vehicles. German soldiers attempting to escape described scenes of apocalyptic destruction. Roads were carpeted with dead horses and burning vehicles. Allied fighter bombers attacked in waves every 20 minutes. Artillery fell continuously. The systematic destruction was so complete that many soldiers simply gave up, preferring captivity to certain death. The final accounting of the Normandy campaign tells a story of complete German defeat. German losses, June 6th to August 31st. Approximately 320,000 casualties, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, 210,000 missing or captured. 2,300 tanks destroyed, virtually all armour in France. 2,127 aircraft lost. Allied losses, 209,672 casualties, with replacements exceeding losses daily. Approximately 4,000 tanks lost, replaced within weeks. 4,101 aircraft lost, from a force exceeding 13,000. The disparity revealed the fundamental truth. Germany was fighting an attritional battle it could not win against an enemy with virtually unlimited reserves. Professional German military officers provided the most objective assessments of the disaster. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich Eberbach, who assumed command in Normandy after Rommel was wounded, reported to OKW on August 1st. The enemy's material superiority is at least 20-1 in artillery, 10-1 in tanks, and absolute in aircraft. He can replace all losses within days. We cannot replace anything. General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, wrote in his 1949 memoir, "Normandy proved that courage alone could not overcome industrial supremacy. We faced an enemy who had mechanized not just warfare but victory itself." General Feldmarschall Erwin Rommel left the most powerful testament to the Normandy experience. In his final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before being severely wounded by Allied aircraft, he wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, but the unequal struggle is nearing its end. The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is beginning to tell. I must beg you to draw the necessary conclusions without delay." This was military language for complete defeat. Rommel, Germany's most celebrated commander, was telling Hitler that the war was lost. The Normandy campaign revealed that World War II had become a production war. German soldiers witnessed American industrial capacity that defied their comprehension. Ford's Willow Run plant alone produced one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at peak production. American factories produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944. Allied ammunition expenditure in one day exceeded German production in a month. A single American division consumed more supplies daily than an entire German corps. Hans von Luck, reflecting on Normandy in his memoir, wrote, "We learned that modern war was not about tactics or courage, but about production. The Americans had turned war into an industrial process. They manufactured victory on assembly lines. The German soldiers who survived Normandy were psychologically transformed. They had witnessed the complete invalidation of everything they had been taught about warfare, racial superiority, and national destiny." Heinrich Sevelow, the machine gunner of WN-62, spent the rest of his life haunted by his D-Day experience. In his 2005 memoir, he wrote about meeting American D-Day veterans. "We all realized we had been young men thrown into an industrial slaughterhouse. My 13,500 rounds meant nothing against their unlimited replacements." Friedrich von der Heydte, the paratrooper commander, became a professor of international law after the war. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the era of warrior heroes was over. War had become a matter of industrial capacity, and we had challenged the world's greatest industrial power with horses and outdated dreams. D-Day, from the German perspective, was not merely a military defeat, it was a complete ideological and psychological collapse. Soldiers who had conquered most of Europe discovered that everything they believed about their enemies, their cause, and their capabilities was catastrophically wrong. They had expected to face weak, divided democracies. Instead, they encountered an alliance that had transformed war into an industrial process of overwhelming efficiency. They witnessed democracy's arsenal in action: unlimited ships, planes, tanks, and supplies flowing from factories whose capacity exceeded German comprehension. The German defenders of Normandy learned that modern war was won not on battlefields, but in factories, not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most productive societies. They discovered that the Western Allies had revolutionized warfare, turning it into a mathematical equation where production statistics mattered more than tactical brilliance. Heinrich Sevelow began June 6th believing the invasion would be thrown back within hours. He ended it surrounded by thousands of empty shell casings. Watching endless waves of Allied reinforcements land on the beach his position was supposed to control. His experience embodied the larger German tragedy in Normandy. Tactical success drowned in strategic impossibility. The beaches of Normandy became not just a battlefield, but a revelation. German soldiers witnessed the future of warfare, and it belonged to the societies that could produce the most material and apply it most efficiently. They had brought courage, training, and determination to the battle. The Allies brought unlimited industrial production. In trying to hold back the Allied invasion, the German defenders might as well have been trying to hold back the tide itself. They fired until their barrels melted, fought until their ammunition ran out, and watched as the Allies simply brought more of everything. The mathematics of modern war had rendered their courage irrelevant. The German soldiers who faced D-Day learned history's hardest lesson. In the age of industrial warfare, nations that could not match their enemy's production were doomed to defeat, regardless of their soldiers' skill or sacrifice. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich and ended it as witnesses to the arsenal of democracy in its full, terrifying efficiency. Their defeat was not just military but total, a crushing demonstration that the Nazi vision of racial superiority and military dominance had collided with the reality of Allied industrial supremacy and shattered completely. The invasion they had promised to throw back into the sea had instead swept them away, carrying with it the last illusions of German victory. May 28, 1940. Reich Air Ministry, Berlin. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring set down the intelligence report with undisguised contempt. The document detailed President Roosevelt's request to Congress for an unprecedented expansion of American aircraft production, a capacity to manufacture 50,000 planes annually. "The Americans are desperate if they believe such propaganda will frighten us," Göring told his staff. "They know nothing of war production. Let them try to convert their automobile factories. They will learn that building warplanes requires more than assembly lines." What Göring failed to grasp was that in Detroit, a Danish immigrant named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former General Motors president, now working for $1 per year as Roosevelt's production chief, was orchestrating the most ambitious industrial transformation in human history. Within 4 years, American factories would produce not the impossible 50,000 aircraft Göring dismissed, but nearly 100,000 planes annually, while simultaneously supplying 2 theatres of war across opposite oceans. The proclamation that triggered German contempt came on May 16, 1940, as German panzers raced through France. Standing before Congress, Franklin Roosevelt declared, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." The reaction was skepticism even among allies. In 1939, America had produced just 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps possessed 1,700 combat planes, many obsolete. Yet Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase in production. William Knudsen became the architect of this miracle. When asked who could achieve such impossible production, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch responded, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen." Knudsen had abandoned his $300,000 salary to serve his adopted nation, bringing automotive mass production principles to aircraft manufacturing. The transformation began immediately. By December 1941, American factories were producing 2,000 military aircraft monthly, a 20-fold increase from 2 years earlier. The Ford Motor Company announced plans for a massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing expanded its Seattle facilities. Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of workers. The arsenal of democracy was awakening. The Nazi leadership's dismissal of American capabilities stemmed from both racial prejudice and willful blindness. General Friedrich von Boeticher, Wehrmacht military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, sent accurate reports describing American industrial mobilization. His December 1940 cable warned, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." Berlin dismissed these warnings as defeatist exaggeration. When Boeticher met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss American potential, the Führer ranted about American racial degeneracy, rather than listening to intelligence assessments. Hitler proclaimed Americans half Judaized, half negrified, and incapable of sustained warfare. This ideological blindness would prove fatal. The prejudice permeated all levels. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women entering aircraft factories as signs of American desperation. They couldn't conceive that democratic mobilization might exceed totalitarian command. When reports arrived of factories running 3 shifts, German analysts assumed exaggeration. The Nazi worldview simply couldn't accommodate American reality. Ford's Willow Run plant embodied American ambition. Constructed on farmland beginning April 18, 1941, it became the world's largest factory under one roof, 3.5 million square feet with an assembly line stretching 1 mile. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised to build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber per hour, when other factories managed 1 per day. Initial results were catastrophic. The first bomber, completed September 1942, required complete rebuilding. Quality control failures reached 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run produced just 56 bombers monthly against promises of hundreds. Critics dubbed it "Will It Run?" But Ford engineers persevered, breaking the B-24's 488,193 parts into manageable sub-assemblies. They developed hydraulic riveting tools, prefabricated wiring harnesses, and moving assembly lines. They accommodated 578 design changes in 1943 alone, while maintaining production. By September 1943, monthly production reached 148 bombers. By December, 365. The breakthrough came in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24s, 1 every 63 minutes, 24 hours daily. This single factory was outproducing the entire German aviation industry. German pilots first recognized American production superiority during the Tunisia campaign. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commanding JG-77, noted in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." The revelation accelerated through 1943. January 27th marked the first American raid on Germany itself, 64 bombers attacking Wilhelmshaven. By October, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The mathematics had become inescapable. During Big Week, February 20th to 25th, 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but more critically, approximately 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland reported to Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters monthly while producing 1,000. America was producing 2,500 fighters monthly while losing 400. Major Heinz Baer, one of Germany's top aces with 220 victories, described a January 1944 mission over Brunswick. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, American aircraft production reached staggering proportions. That year alone, factories produced 96,270 aircraft, 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. This single year's production exceeded Germany's entire wartime output of approximately 94,677 aircraft. The disparity went beyond numbers. Each American bomber carried 13.50 caliber machine guns with thousands of rounds. German fighters increasingly launched with partial ammunition loads. American bombers featured powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation equipment. German fighters often lacked functioning radios. Boeing's Seattle Plant 2 was producing 16 B-17s daily by May 1944. Douglas aircraft, which employed just 68 people in 1936, had grown to 167,000 workers across 9 facilities. North American aviation churned out 500 P-51 Mustangs monthly. Lockheed achieved production of one P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, while implementing 2,127 combat-driven modifications. Supporting industries matched this pace. General Motors produced 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard built 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlins. Alcoa's aluminum output increased 600%. Dow Chemical's magnesium production grew from £6 million annually to $333 million. The transformation of America's workforce shattered Nazi preconceptions. Women, comprising less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, represented 65% by 1943, 310,000 women among aircraft industry workers. At Douglas Long Beach, 22,308 of 41,602 employees were women. Rose Will Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. Women inspectors at Douglas reduced defect rates from 3.2 to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands, inadvertently improving efficiency. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced fatigue, while better positioned workstations decreased injuries. German intelligence interpreted female employment as desperation. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these workers as temporary, predicting quality collapse. Instead, precision improved. Women excelled at detailed work: wiring, instruments, inspection. Their integration represented democratic strength, not weakness. As American production soared, Germany retreated into fantasy. Göring authorized the Jägerstab program in February 1944, dispersing production into 729 underground facilities using slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex employed 60,000 prisoners in horrific conditions, with 20,000 dying. These underground factories produced more defects than aircraft. Slave laborers sabotaged components. Transportation between dispersed facilities caused delays. Quality control collapsed. The entire Mittelwerk complex produced fewer engines monthly than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation accelerated. Boeing developed modular B-29 construction across 4 facilities with completely interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29, costing $605,000 each, incorporated technology Germany couldn't match in prototypes. By early 1945, America was producing 100 B-29s monthly. June 6, 1944, demonstrated the culmination of American production. The invasion employed 11,590 Allied aircraft against 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 superiority. This wasn't tactical advantage, but industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, preparatory bombing dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, exceeding all German bombing of Britain throughout the war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in one day using more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet ever possessed. By December 1944, single raids involved 1,200 bombers escorted by 900 fighters. P-51 Mustangs possessed range to reach Poland, performance to match any opponent, and existed in quantities making losses irrelevant. German pilots called them Indians, swarming everywhere simultaneously. As defeat approached, even Nazi leadership acknowledged the production catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem criminal delusions. We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric." Rommel told his staff before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler admitted to Speer in January 1945. We should have listened to Böttcher's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands. Albert Speer later testified that American bombing reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated unequivocally, "The American attacks, which followed a definite system of assault on industrial targets, caused the breakdown of German armaments." Germany's Me-262 jet fighter, operational mid-1944, represented genuine innovation, 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring believed this wonder weapon could restore air superiority despite numerical inferiority. But Germany produced just 1,430 Me-262s total, with never more than 200 operational simultaneously. Engines required overhaul every 10 hours. Critical materials were unavailable, forcing inferior substitutions. America, meanwhile, had begun jet development in 1942. While the Bell P-59 proved inferior to German jets, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German jet, entered production before war's end. American industrial depth allowed simultaneous pursuit of multiple technologies, a luxury Germany couldn't afford. The contrast epitomized the production war's outcome. Germany's technological superiority in jets meant nothing against America's ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters while simultaneously developing next-generation aircraft. Quality without quantity proved worthless in total war. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his confrontation with reality. Initially defiant at the interrogation facility in Augsburg, he maintained German technology had been superior, overcome only by numbers. His subsequent transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the dedicated facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, brought intensive interrogation. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted extensive interviews documenting Göring's evolving recognition of American industrial superiority. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted to Heckler, "but the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at peak. It was incomprehensible." He expressed particular astonishment at American logistics. "Your ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while maintaining domestic production. This was beyond our conception. We couldn't adequately supply forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." During his trial at Nuremberg, prosecutors presented Göring with overwhelming evidence of American production superiority. Charts showed America producing more aircraft monthly by 1944 than Germany managed annually. Films of Willow Run's assembly lines played while prosecutors listed German cities destroyed by bombers from that single factory. Göring's March 14, 1946 testimony revealed his struggle to comprehend the scale. "I believed the economic and technical potential of the United States to be unusually great, particularly the Air Force. But I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert documented Göring's obsession with production statistics. He repeatedly calculated ratios, comparing single American factories to entire German production. He seemed particularly fixated on Willow Run, calling it "that damned factory that broke our backs." When shown that America had produced 812,615 aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the figures in silence. The mathematical reality of defeat was undeniable. The transformation's scope remains staggering even today. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, America produced 295,959 by war's end, 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, 98,684 others. This represented not just quantity, but systemic superiority in every aspect of production. 2 million Americans worked in aircraft production at peak, including unprecedented diversity: women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens. This democratic mobilization achieved what totalitarian command could not: voluntary cooperation that exceeded forced labor's output by every metric. The workforce that entered factories in 1941, knowing nothing about aircraft, emerged in 1945 as the world's most skilled aviation workers. They didn't just build planes, they revolutionized manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control, developed for bomber production, became standard industrial practice worldwide. Automation principles pioneered at Willow Run transformed global manufacturing. The engineers who designed bomber assembly lines would design the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s would raise children who walked on the moon. The production miracle didn't end with victory. It launched the American century. The financial dimensions defied economic orthodoxy. Aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s dollars, equivalent to $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet rather than bankrupting America, war production created unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment, which had plagued the Depression decade, vanished completely. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. War bond sales by workers themselves financed much of the expansion. Willow Run workers alone purchased $45 million in bonds, funding their own factories' operations. Germany, conversely, consumed 40% of its entire industrial capacity for aircraft production by 1944, yet produced less than half American output. Slave labor, increasingly relied upon, proved catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was endemic. Quality collapsed. Productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943, while American productivity increased 300%. The production infrastructure built for war became the foundation for post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters built for bombers produced materials for suburban housing. Chemical plants that made aviation fuel created plastics for consumer goods. Machine tool factories that equipped aircraft plants tooled up American industry for global dominance. Beyond raw production lay organizational excellence. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies seamlessly. IBM punch card machines tracked millions of components across thousands of suppliers. MIT's radiation laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed navigation systems that gave American bombers all-weather capability. When combat revealed B-17 vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within 60 days. When Pacific operations required extended range, Consolidated modified B-24s without stopping production. German modifications took months or years. American improvements took weeks. This adaptability proved as decisive as production volume. American aircraft evolved continuously based on global combat experience. Information flowed from Pacific battles to Atlantic production lines within days. German aircraft, produced in isolated underground facilities by slave labor, remained static while American designs improved weekly. The feedback loop between combat and production achieved unprecedented efficiency. Pilots' observations reached engineers immediately. Engineers' solutions reached assembly lines within days. Assembly line workers' suggestions reached designers directly. This democratic flow of information proved superior to German hierarchical command. On October 15, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he made his most complete admission of the production war's significance. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of building consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His last recorded statement to Gilbert was equally revealing. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They didn't just outproduce us, they revolutionized production itself. Every aspect of their system proved superior to ours. Göring committed suicide that night, but his final testimony stands as history's verdict on the production war. The Reichsmarshal who had dismissed American capabilities died knowing a single American factory exceeded his entire Air Force's lifetime production. Military historians consider the American production achievement the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it provided, D-Day would have been impossible, the bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. Richard Overy, the leading historian of the Air War, concluded, "The outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. The Allies won because they buried their enemies under an avalanche of production." The numbers support this assessment absolutely. By 1944, America alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, Axis and Allied. This wasn't incremental superiority, but order of magnitude dominance. Germany faced not defeat, but obliteration. Yet the production miracle's significance transcended military victory. It proved democracy's superiority to dictatorship, freedom's advantage over tyranny, voluntary cooperation's strength over forced obedience. The workers who achieved this transformation weren't slaves or conscripts, but free citizens united in common purpose. Hermann Göring's dismissal of American production capacity stands as history's most catastrophic miscalculation. His contempt for democratic industrial potential cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His failure to recognize American capabilities sealed the Third Reich's fate before the first bomber reached German skies. The transformation from 3,000 to 100,000 aircraft annually demonstrated that free societies, when facing existential threats, could achieve the impossible. American workers didn't just meet Roosevelt's impossible goal, they doubled it. They didn't just match German production, they exceeded it fivefold while simultaneously fighting in the Pacific. Today's leaders would do well to remember Göring's mistake. Dismissing democratic nations as weak because they're peaceful, or underestimating free people's productive capacity because they prefer prosperity to conquest, invites catastrophic miscalculation. America in 1940 appeared unprepared for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be as decisive as front lines, that assembly workers could be as crucial as soldiers, that industrial mobilization could determine victory as surely as military strategy. Göring learned this lesson too late, at the cost of his nation's destruction. From his dismissive reaction to Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his execution at Nuremberg in October 1946, Hermann Göring's journey traced the arc of Nazi Germany's destruction. His contempt for American production became the epitaph for the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with capability, that mistook tyranny for strength, that believed racial mythology could overcome industrial mathematics. The Reichsmarshal, who dismissed American aircraft production, died knowing that American factories had produced more planes in 1944 alone than Germany managed throughout the entire war. His mockery of democratic industrial capacity became history's most expensive joke, paid for in the currency of total defeat. America produced 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. But the real victory lay not in numbers but in method, proving that free workers could outproduce slaves, that democratic cooperation could exceed totalitarian command, that a nation of immigrants and diverse citizens could unite to achieve the impossible. The B-24 bombers rolling off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes weren't just aircraft. They were democracy's answer to tyranny. Each rivet driven by a woman who'd been a housewife months earlier, each engine built by a teenager who'd left high school to serve, each wing assembled by workers who'd fled poverty and discrimination, all proved that free peoples, when united in righteous cause, could bury tyranny under an avalanche of production. Hermann Göring laughed at the idea of America producing 50,000 planes annually. America responded by producing twice that many, transforming global history in the process. His laughter echoed through history as the sound of catastrophic miscalculation, the fatal dismissal of democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither democracy nor production. In the end, both buried him and everything he represented under 300,000 aircraft that turned his contempt into history's most complete defeat.